Which choice best describes the function of the underlined portion in the text as a whole? In response to concerns that some recent financial crises were exacerbated by consumers misunderstanding risks associated with credit cards, loans, and other financial products, policymakers in many countries have instituted risk disclosure requirements on sellers of those products. Enrique Sierra et al. Investigated a variety of risk disclosure messages sent to thousands of credit card customers and found that the messages had only small and short-lived effect on behaviors. Sierra et al. Asserted that such effects may nevertheless be worth pursuing, given the negligible cost of messaging. So the text highlights how there were concerns in the recent financial crises, which were made worse by consumers misunderstanding the risks associated with financial products like credit cards and loans. So then policymakers made a requirement that risk disclosures requirements must be made by sellers of those products. And then a study was made on these risk disclosure requirements and through these messages specifically, and they found that these messages had a small and short-lived effect on the behavior. However, they ended by saying that the effect of these messages may nevertheless be worth pursuing, given the negligible cost of messaging. So because there's so little cost of messaging, it's still worth it to send these messages. So with that, let's look at the answer choices. A. It knows a factor that's led Sierra et al. To not dismiss risk disclosure messaging altogether, despite their evidence of its limited utility. So this seems to be the correct answer because the sentence highlights that Sierra et al. Asserted that such effects may nevertheless be worth pursuing, given the negligible cost of messaging. So it highlights how because the cost of messaging is so little or so small, that it's worth pursuing these efforts. And this is reflected in answer choice A because it says that it knows a factor that led him not to dismiss risk disclosure messaging, even though they have limited use or effect. So overall, A seems to be the correct answer. B. Acknowledges a type of risk disclosure messaging that Sierra et al. May not have fully accounted for in their study. This is incorrect because in the underlined portion they didn't mention any specific risk disclosure messaging. They simply said that the reason why the efforts may be worth pursuing is because of the low cost of messaging. So because B doesn't match the underlined portion in the text, we can eliminate option choice B. C. Describes a consideration that explains why Sierra et al. Recommended risk disclosure messaging, even though its effect may be small relative to its cost. This is incorrect because it highlights that this phrase here, it says even though its effects may be small relative to its cost, is the reason that Sierra et al. Recommended risk disclosure messaging. It's the way the C is worded incorrectly reflects the underlined portion of the text, because the underlined portion of the text highlights that the reasoning behind why Sierra et al. Recommended still pursuing these efforts is because of the small cost of messaging, not that he recommended it even though its effects may be small relative to its costs. So overall, C doesn't match the text or the underlined portion of the text, so we can eliminate option choice C. D. It points out a circumstance that Sierra et al. Conceded may make risk disclosure messaging more effective than their study suggests. This is incorrect because the underlying portion doesn't highlight a circumstance that would make risk disclosure messaging more effective. It simply says the reason behind why pursuing those efforts is still worth it, which is that the low cost of messaging makes these efforts still worth pursuing. So because option choice D doesn't match the underlined portion, we can eliminate D. And with that, we know that the correct answer is A.